Nobody talks about this in the topic of moving abroad with young kids. So today I wanted to share with you my personal experience, the good and the bad side of moving abroad as a kid. So a few years ago, I came across this term, which is third culture kid, TCK. And when I read about what it was, everything light up in my brain. I was like, uh-huh. That's it. That explains it. So, for those of you who are not familiar with what TCK is, let me read you the definition. Third culture kid TCKs are individuals who have spent a significant part of their formative years in a culture different from their parents' home country. Okay? This term was coined in the 50s, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you can do the research, you can look it up on Google, but basically, it's a term to call kids who have lived abroad. Okay, so as you are a parent who is considering moving abroad, or maybe you have moved abroad with your young kids who are still in formative years, so younger than 18 years old, this definitely applies to you. There's definitely a lot of advantages, but also challenges for third culture kids. And I'm going to share some of these with you today from my own perspective as a third culture kid. So let's start with the challenges and then we'll go into the many, many advantages. So the first challenge is that very often a third culture kid doesn't really have a clear definition of where home is. So if you ask me where my home is, it will depend. My answer will really depend on who's asking me and what you really want me to answer. Sometimes I will say it's the Congo, sometimes I will say it's Morocco, sometimes I will say it's Houston, Texas. It really depends on the conversation. And it also depends on where my parents are and where my parents were 10 years ago or today. And so my answer has changed throughout the years. And so there's really this sense of not knowing where I belong because sometimes this is where I belong, sometimes this is where I feel like I belong. So it's very confusing for a kid to grow up in an environment where they know they're a foreigner and that sometimes, depending on how hostile that environment is, they might be made known that they're foreigners, or sometimes they might not even be made known that they're foreigners, and that's great. But I did grow up in an environment where I clearly knew that I was a foreigner. So, with that, the other challenge is that you frequently ask yourself, who am I? Who am I? Since I don't really know where I belong, then your identity is a little confused because you are in those formative years, right? You are elementary school, middle school, high school years, and you're still trying to figure out who you are, where you stand, like outside of just your family. And so you don't really know. You're just existing, but you don't really know where you belong. Mostly if you've moved several times. It wasn't the case for us, but we knew that we lived many, many years in Morocco and we were not Moroccan and we're still not Moroccan. So in terms of identity, it was very hard to figure out, okay, who am I? Because it's like, am I Congolese? But at the same time, I don't speak Lingala, which is one of the main languages spoken in the Congo. But I was born in Morocco, but I'm not Moroccan. Yes, I do speak Arabic, but at the same time, went to a French school, but I'm not French. So it's like, who am I really? And the third culture kid kind of identifies with multiple cultures. And that's one of the great things about being a third culture kid. Another challenge for the third culture kid that sometimes happens because of this sense of not knowing if they belong where they are is the fear of rejection. Mostly if you've been in a setting where you have clearly been told that you don't belong. And then you go into another setting and then you're clearly being told that you don't belong. And then when you are about to go to a new setting, you have that fear of being rejected because your past experiences have shown you that you get rejected and you're not accepted for who you are because you're not fully this person. For example, if you grew up in a black neighborhood but you went to a white school, maybe your friends in your neighborhood will tell you that you're not black enough because you attend a white school or because you speak like a white person, or that would be a way to understand what a third culture kid goes through. Another challenge that I've experienced as a third culture kid is friendships, because in the environment where we were, technically we all of my friends or most of my friends were also third culture kids because they were not necessarily from Morocco and they came in and then they left, right? And so that's why most of my childhood friends, or I think most of the women in my wedding party were all coming from different places from around the world. And in those formative years where you're making like lifelong friends and your besties and all of that, now when you grow up, you don't get to see them that often because they've moved all around the world, right? And so during my wedding, I think out of the 8 bridesmaids and maid of honor that I had, maybe 2 of them lived in the US, but everybody else was coming from all around the world. And that's one of the outcomes of being a third culture kid. And to be friends with other third culture kids is that you just end up growing in different spaces, but you don't get to see each other very often. Now that we've talked about the challenges, let's talk about the advantages because trust me, there are a lot of advantages about being a third culture kid. And these are the things that I absolutely love about being a TCK. First of all, is the ability to learn more languages. So I'm quadrilingual, kind of. French is my first, supposed to be my first, even though I don't get to speak it very often. Before I came to the US, Spanish was my second, but now it's my third. English is my second, and Arabic my fourth. So when you move into a new environment where they speak a language different than English, then your kids are definitely going to be fluent in that language. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. Kids just pick up language like that. I was fluent in all 4 languages before the age of 10. Okay. We started taking English in 6th grade, but we already knew how to speak it because we grew up in an American church. We started taking Spanish in what is the equivalent of of 6, 7, 8, 8th grade. But we were all already fluent because we watch cartoons in Spanish and everybody speaks Spanish. Everybody grows up speaking Spanish because we're learning with the TV. And so in school, you learn the grammar and everything, but you already know how to speak it. Okay. So Arabic, because that's what you speak in the street when you go to the store and all of that. And French was at home and we went to French schools, right? So for your kids, it's going to be the same thing. Naturally, in that environment, they're going to pick up on all these different languages. And with that is the other advantage of adaptability. Because you are able to adapt to these different cultural differences, your family's culture, your friend's culture, maybe the schools, or even the environment where you are, all these different cultures, all these different norms make you an adult that is very sensitive to others, very tolerant and understanding to other cultures, but also very adaptable. The idea of moving abroad as a third culture kid is not so much fearful because you have had to adapt and to adjust to different cultures growing up. And so now as an adult, it makes it exciting. It makes it, it's like deja vu. It's not something that you are unfamiliar with. And so, as a parent, knowing that your child is going to grow these skills that they're going to need as adult, adaptability, tolerance, understanding, all of that, this is a great thing for them. And also, these are great for the job market. Being able to speak multiple languages, being able to have cross cultural understanding, all of these things are great for your resume. So I truly believe that as a third culture kid, when you grow up in this mix of culture, your family's culture, your friends' culture, your new country's culture, you get to again adapt to all of these things and you learn so much about these cultures that when you grow up, you have this ability to connect with everybody. You have this ability to connect with strangers because you might have these points of reference that are common between you and that other person. This actually happened this past weekend. I was at a friend's house and one of her guests came in and she said her name, and her name sounded Francophone African. So immediately when I said hi, I didn't say, "Hi, how are you? My name is Linda." I said, "Bonjour, comment ça va?" I introduced myself in French because I knew that we had that point of connection, and that automatically allowed us to connect at a different level than if it was just in English, okay? And on top of that, she's from Ivory Coast, and that made it even more exciting to me. So I'm so excited that I get to have a new friend from Ivory Coast. So all that to say that if you are moving abroad with young children, your kids will learn and gain so much from this experience. You have to be aware of these things when it comes to self-esteem, when it comes to identity, when it comes to having that sense of belonging, and really reassuring your child to tell them that yes, they belong. And I think that your job is really to make sure that home is always safe. Whatever other cultures are around them outside of the house that they can take from, which is great, always make sure that, you know what, here at home, regardless of what's outside, between these four walls, you are safe, you're secure, I got you. Um, Things will stay the same. These are the constants. At home is a constant. And that way they will always have that safety that they can go back to. And when I say home, I mean like literally inside of your house, right? So everywhere you go around the world, they know that where the parents are, where the siblings are, I'm safe. This is my home. And that's why wherever you move, it can be home, right? It's not so much about the country, it's not so much about the city, but it's where you feel safe, where you feel like family is there to support you. Okay, so that's my encouragement to you. I wanted to share my own experience as a third culture kid to kind of share what it's like to be a third culture kid and the fact that there are so many benefits to it. And I'm sure your children will also embrace all of these great things, even though there's some challenges, but the benefits definitely outweigh the many challenges that you can have as you're moving abroad with your young kids. If you have any questions for me about what it's like to be a third culture kid, definitely let me know in the comments. And if you are a third culture kid, let me know as well in the comments. In the meantime, I invite you to watch this video right here where I'll tell you more about our process of moving abroad. Until next time.